So 3 or 4 weeks ago, I tested the Asics Metaspeed Sky Tokyo versus the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 4. After that, lots of you asked me to do the same test, but this time with the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo versus the Deviate Nitro Elite 4. I've spent a couple of weeks doing fast runs in between injuries in these shoes, and I've finally got a really good measure of each of them, and I found out that they're not quite as similar as I thought they might be. Let's chat. Hi there, I'm Chris, a journalist who loves nothing more than cutting through the hype to tell it like it is. I'm also dad to 13-year-old Ben and 19-year-old Sam, and both have been joining me on long runs, particularly on weekends when their football training allows, and that's been really nice. It's kind of what running is about for me now. It gives us really nice family time amidst all of the other responsibilities. My next event is a half marathon in Melbourne in about 3 months from now. In that event, I will very likely be wearing one of these two pairs of shoes, either the Asics Metaspeed Edge Tokyo or the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 4. And as part of working out which one I should actually wear for the event, I've been out over the last few weeks for fast runs. I'll go out for 5 or 10 kilometers wearing one pair, come back, get changed, and head out and do the same run immediately in the other pair. Please do subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of thorough back-to-back testing. There's lots more to come. So for most of this review, I will be comparing these two shoes. But at the end, what I'd like to do is also bring in the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo, because I think those three shoes, the Sky, the Edge, and the DNE 4, represent the full spectrum of race shoes. And I'll explain that at the end. First, the very fast facts. The Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 4 has an 8mm drop from 40mm at the rear to 32mm up front and weighs in at 168 grams in my US 9.5 on my dodgy kitchen scales. The Asics Metaspeed Edge has a 5mm drop from 39.5mm at the rear to 34.5mm up front, and today weighs in at 166 grams in my US 9.5. So let's start with the similarities. Both of these shoes fit true to size, and both have a generous amount of space in the forefoot for my relatively chunky trotters. Both have lovely light sawtooth laces, which make it really easy to achieve lockdown. They're long enough for any type of lacing, and I still kind of can't believe that we have to discuss this anymore, but thanks to Adidas, who haven't been able to put a decent pair of laces in their shoes for about the last 5 years, we still need to talk about the laces in race shoes. Both shoes also have a really nice amount of padding, just a very light but perfect amount of padding around their very, very lightly structured heel cups. And the Puma has a little bit of padding around the tongue, while the Asics has none. However, neither really needs this padding because both are very, very comfortable shoes to wear. The uppers of both of these race shoes are non-stretch, but thin and highly breathable. And when it comes to breathability, the Edge Tokyo has, well, the Edge. This shoe is ridiculously breathable, and it's fairly transparent, as I'm sure you can see from pretty much any angle. I mean, you can just see through this shoe from no matter where you're looking. But having said that, both of the shoes breathe very well, and you're not going to get overly hot feet in either of them. Let's skip the midsoles for the moment, because that's where the differences in these two shoes mainly arise. And we'll head straight for the outsole. And for once, the Puma grip does not automatically win the Best Outsole award. It is still an excellent outsole, but the Puma's smoother and lighter and less chunky sort of outsole, especially compared to the Deviate Nitro Elite 3, which definitely had more form and shape around its outsole, is not quite as sticky as we're used to from Puma grip. Still, both of these outsoles do an excellent job, and I wouldn't complain about any of them. The one thing to watch out for is the fact that the Puma on the inside of under the heel does not have a layer of outsole rubber. So if you're a heel striker in these shoes, that might be something that you want to look out for. However, I've done about 100 kilometers in these shoes now. None of the exposed midsole foam is showing any sign of wear, so I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. Finally, and probably most importantly, both of these shoes are ridiculously comfortable on the foot, particularly considering that they've been bred for racing. It's not so long ago that we were asked to accept the fact that race shoes are going to be incredibly uncomfortable, but hey, you're only going to need them on your foot for the duration of the race. But now, and I know I've said this before, particularly about the Deviate Nitro Elite 4, you could wear this shoe to the shops or out for a casual outing with your friends, and you would be perfectly comfortable in it all day long. That is how far great race shoe technology has come. The DNE 4 is an incredibly stable shoe, and the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo is also fairly stable. It's not as stable as the DNE 4. It has a tiny bit more wobble under the heel, but nothing that you will notice once you're running, and it certainly has nowhere near the level of instability you experience in its cousin, the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. Okay, on to the midsole. And here's where we will begin to discuss the shoes one by one. Let's start with the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo. Importantly, the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo has a layer of FF Leap foam, which is quite soft and springy and potentially unstable above a fairly steeply sloping carbon plate between the two lines of foam. This plate itself is stiff, but not extremely so. You can actually force some bend fairly easily in these shoes. I actually hate doing that because I feel like I'm damaging the shoe, so I'm not going to do that a whole lot. But the important thing to notice is that this midsole is stiff, but it will bend quite easily under pressure. Below the carbon plate is a very generous layer of Flight Foam Turbo Plus foam, which is a lot firmer than the Flight Foam Leap foam above. And it's this big chunky layer of firmer foam that gives the Edge its stability. The Metaspeed Sky, on the other hand, and I'll bring that in as we're talking about it just now, has the opposite. It's got a great big chunky layer of Leap foam below the carbon plate. And this Leap foam, of course, is incredibly soft, very squishy, very, very springy, and that is what causes the Metaspeed Sky to be so unstable. There is a lot of wobble under the heel of the Sky, but we're not talking about the Sky yet. That deeply swooping plate in the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, and the really lovely mix of foams, the firm foam beneath and the softer, springier foam above, it results in a running feel that isn't poppy in the way that we imagine a poppy carbon-plated running experience. Instead, it seems to create a greater efficiency in terms of rolling and then springing your feet forwards. Because the plate that you're landing on is at a slope, when you hit the ground, rather than popping you straight back up, it pops you forward. And because of that softer layer of Leap foam above the carbon plate in the Metaspeed Edge, the ride is very comfortable and, for race shoes at least, a little bit soft. Now, it's not squishy, it's not slow soft, it's just a really comfortable ride. The Edge Tokyos do remain very comfortable over the long run and are very forgiving of a breakdown in form, particularly later in a long run or later in a race. And that is unlike the extremely unforgiving Metaspeed Sky, which we're not talking about yet. And actually, for a full and really simple breakdown of the differences between the Metaspeed Sky and the Metaspeed Edge, I will link to my review video in the description below. That comparison review video, which stays right away from the silly Asics explanation of these shoes being for cadence runners or for stride runners, etc., has had some really great feedback from runners in terms of just explaining the differences between these shoes in a really simple way. And by the way, while we're here, Benny and I buy all of our own shoes to review on this channel. And if you'd like to see more, you can support us by simply clicking like and subscribe. That helps us enormously, thank you. Now let's move on to talking about the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 4. Just like the Edge, this also has a dual foam midsole with softer foam at the top and firmer foam below. You can actually feel the difference just by squeezing your finger into the edge of the shoe. Also, like the edge between those two layers of foam, there is a carbon plate sloping downwards. This time it's a carbon plate you can see through the little window in the midsole of the shoe. This carbon plate does slope downwards, similar to the edge, but it slopes down at a slightly flatter angle. It doesn't have that really deep swoop at the bottom. But most importantly, in the Deviate Nitro Elite 4, this entire midsole is far stiffer. It's far more structured. It's very, very difficult to make it bend. And it's that incredible stiffness that creates the really unique and incredibly fast running experience in the DNE 4s. That doesn't mean that these shoes are incredibly firm to run in, although they're certainly firmer than most race shoes. But if you like a firm ride, like I do, if you're a fan, say, of the Super Blast 2, then you will absolutely love the DNE 4. So the effect that this has on the running feeling, where the edge provides a fast forward rolling feeling, the DNE 4 provides much more of a springboard feeling. It's as if you land, the weight of your body bends the shoe, and then like a diving board, you're flung forward. The way I have described it before is that it makes your feet feel incredibly light. It means that you're able to turn over your feet much more quickly. Your steps become quicker and much more efficient without losing any extra amounts of energy. And that leads, actually surprisingly, to a really natural feel in your run. No matter how your feet are landing, whether you're landing on your heel or your midfoot or your forefoot, you do get an amazing feeling of lightness in your feet. And for a fast run or over a long distance, that can only be good. And this is where I'd also like to bring in the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo, because you can see here, because of the fairly flat alignment of the carbon plate, it tends to pop your foot upwards. So when you land on that plate, it pushes straight downwards and pops your foot upwards, which leads to that wonderful, really, really enjoyable carbon plated pop feeling in each step. The Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, on the other hand, has the sloping plate, so when you land, rather than popping you upwards, it pushes you forwards. It lets your foot sink down into the foam, and then on the release of that foam, it pushes you forwards and brings more of a fast rolling feeling. And finally, as I said, the Deviate Nitro Elite 4 instead has more of a springboard feeling. So your foot lands, bends this incredibly firm midsole, which then straightens out quick smart and springs your foot forward. They are three very different race shoe experiences, each of them fantastic in their own way. However, it is the Edge and the DNE 4 that have much more in common, partly because they're both very stable shoes. The DNE 4 in particular is an extremely stable race shoe, where the Edge is relatively stable compared to most other race shoes. They're both very, very comfortable. You'll enjoy walking to the beginning of the race as much as you will racing in these shoes. And they're both just as good for heel strikers as they are for midfoot and forefoot strikers. And finally, but really importantly, they're both incredibly forgiving when form starts to break down later in the race. They will take care of you and keep your pace at a better level than a lot of other race shoes will. What other race shoes am I talking about? Of course, I'm talking about the Metaspeed Sky, which is very unstable because of that big fat layer of leap foam beneath the carbon plate at the back of the shoe. It's not comfortable for anything outside of fast midfoot to forefoot running. It's terrible for heel strikers. There's no stability in the back of these shoes at all. And therefore this shoe is mercilessly unforgiving when your form breaks down. That's not to say it's a bad race shoe. This is the shoe I've chosen for several half marathons and marathons when I've been confident about my training, when I've been sure that my form was not going to break down during the run. But now that I'm getting a bit older and now that I'm nursing a bit of a long-term injury, it is these much more stable shoes that I am going to be looking to for my race. So if we're considering the three of these shoes, how do we choose between them? Well, I'd say if you are a forefoot or midfoot striker and the race distance is shorter, or you are extremely confident about holding your form throughout the entire distance, then the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo is the shoe for you. But over a longer distance, where your form is potentially going to suffer, or if you're just not as confident about how your training stumbling block is gone, then either the Deviate Nitro Elite 4 or the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo is the shoe for you. If your form breaks down, or if you just slow down at any stage during the event, then both of these shoes are going to look after you, and they will keep you moving at a faster pace than a less stable shoe like the Metaspeed Sky. So then how do you choose between these two shoes, the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo and the Deviate Nitro Elite 4? They're both excellent race shoes. They're both ridiculously comfortable for the fact that they're race shoes. They're both stable. They're both very, very fast. The big differences between the shoes are that the Edge is slightly softer underfoot, therefore slightly more comfortable, and the Deviate Nitro Elite 4 is slightly more stable and therefore will look after you better during the late stages of a run. For my upcoming half marathon, I am leaning towards the Deviate Nitro Elite 4, but 3 months of training is a very long time, and if my long-term ankle problem flares up again, then that will lean me back towards the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, which is a bit softer and will probably look after my old bones a bit better. Which would you choose? Let me know in the comments below. I do love hearing your thoughts, and in fact many of my own thoughts are deeply informed by yours, so please continue to share. And please do tap like and subscribe, that really helps us a lot on this little channel. Thank you. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Run safe.